Hello. So we're going to have a look at information provision, and specifically we're going to have a look at information provision with regards to merit goods. So first of all, obviously when we're talking about information provision, we're talking about providing the necessary information to allow economic agents to make informed decisions. That's what we mean by information provision, providing the necessary information to allow economic agents to make informed decisions. So, what market failure does this correct? Well, if we focus particularly on information provision with regards to merit goods, this helps to correct the underconsumption of merit goods. And obviously, merit goods have positive externalities in consumption. So we want to encourage people to consume more. So by providing the necessary information, it should allow economic agents to make informed decisions, and that informed decision should hopefully see the increase in consumption of these particular merit goods. Okay, so we can represent information provision with regards to merit goods two different ways on two different diagrams. So first of all, I'm just going to start off with a basic demand and supply diagram. And then we'll look at a different diagram. So we've got price and quantity on our axes. We have a downward sloping demand curve, and we have an upward sloping supply curve. And we're going to label our equilibrium P and Q. Okay, so with merit goods, we know that we should consume more of these particular goods. So therefore, what we're going to label this demand curve here is we're going to label this imperfect information. Imperfect information. Basically, what we're saying there is we don't have all the necessary information, and that is why these merit goods are under-consumed. However, if we now provide the necessary information to allow economic agents to make informed decisions, what would we expect to see happen to the demand curve? We would expect to see an outward shift of the demand curve, and that's where we see an outward shift from D to D1, and we'll label our new equilibrium. And obviously this increase in demand from D to D1 is obviously representative of, this new demand curve is representative of perfect information. So this is one way we can represent information provision with regards to merit goods, with this outward shift of the demand curve, our supply and demand diagram, moving from D to D1 because of the perfect information that is provided with regard to the benefit of merit goods, and therefore we see an increase in the quantity supplied and demanded of the particular good. So that's one way. And the other way is to use a positive externalities in consumption diagram, and this is the one we're going to use to explain how information provision works. So label the y-axis price, cost and benefit. Label our x-axis quantity. When we're looking at obviously consumption, we've got two downward sloping curves and we have one upward sloping curve. The one upward sloping curve is going to be supply. It's going to be equal to the marginal private cost. It's going to be equal to the marginal social cost. When we're obviously talking about positive externalities in consumption, we know that the social optimum is always to the right, because we always want to consume more of this particular product. So therefore this curve here is going to be marginal social benefit, and therefore that would mean that this curve here is marginal private benefit is equal to demand. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add in our equilibrium points. We have that Q, label that Q1, and we'll just draw some lines across here. Okay, brilliant. And we can add in our welfare loss as well, and that would be this area here. We'll label this point A, we'll label this point B, and we'll label this point C. So area ABC is the welfare loss associated with the underconsumption of the merit good, because obviously the free market equilibrium would be point A, where demand is equal to supply at point A, and the social optimum point where we'd want the consumption to be at is where marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost, and that's point B, size of the externality A to C. So let's explain how information provision helps to correct this market failure. So let's first of all consider the point we just talked about, point A. Point A is the free market equilibrium. There is no government intervention occurring here. Okay, so what we can call this MPB equals D is we can also label this line known as imperfect information. The reason why it's imperfect information is because economic agents don't have the necessary information to make informed decisions, and therefore there is a welfare loss to society of A, B, C, and the quantity being consumed is only a quantity of Q. Ideally, what we'd want to happen is we want to be at the social optimum with greater benefits to society, if we're reading off the y-axis, and a greater quantity therefore being consumed. We want to see the quantity consumed be increased from Q to Q1. So let's explain how information provision corrects this market failure. So information provision occurs. So the government may directly release some information about a particular good. What does that do? Well, that should educate consumers. So we're assuming here that consumers receive the advice and take the advice on board and act on how the advice or the information was intended for them to act upon it. Okay, so educate consumers. So what are consumers therefore going to do based on this advice? Well, they've been told they should consume more of it, so they are going to therefore consume more of it. So we're going to see an increased quantity demanded of the particular product, and we're also going to see a increase in the supply of the product as well. So we're going to see an increase in quantity demanded and an increase in quantity supplied. And we see that with the increase in quantity from Q to Q1. And what we see that the externality is internalized. And the reason why the externality is internalized is because originally when we were operating at the free market equilibrium of point A, there was a welfare loss to society. If now consumption increases to a quantity of Q1, and obviously supply follows suit with that extension along the supply curve, we get to point B, and at point B the externality is internalized. So educate consumers increase their demand, suppliers supply more, and we see an increase in Q to Q, from Q to Q1. Move, and the externality is internalized because we move from the free market equilibrium, which is point A, to the social optimum, which is obviously point B. So, just to recap what we've got so far. So, information is provided, consumers have become more educated now. Consumers are more educated, so they demand a greater quantity. Suppliers follow suit and supply a greater quantity as well. And that's why we see the increase in quantity from Q to Q1. The externality is internalized, moving from the free market equilibrium of point A to the social optimum of B. What we would therefore see is we would see the marginal private benefit now equal the marginal social benefit. And the reason for that is because we have the social optimum achieved. Social optimum achieved with MPB with perfect information is equal to the marginal social cost, which is equal to the marginal social benefit. And obviously we can now add that onto our diagram to represent what we have just talked about. So we've got marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal private benefit with perfect information. So with perfect information, the marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal private benefit with perfect information. And that's why we get the social optimum is achieved with MPB with perfect info is equal to the MSC, which is equal to the MSB. And obviously we solve the market failure because there is increased consumption of the merit good with an increase in quantity from Q to Q1. And what does this do? Well, welfare is maximised because they're at the social optimum. There's no welfare loss. We eliminate that welfare loss that was originally seen, and we get allocative efficiency. So there we have it. We have explained how information provision can be used to correct the market failure associated with merit goods, and we've used a diagram to explain it. So we've got information provision educates consumers. Consumers are going to demand more, suppliers are going to supply more, and therefore we see an increase in quantity from Q to Q1. And as a result, the externality should be internalised as we move from point A, the free market equilibrium, to the social optimum. And we should have a case where the marginal private benefit with the perfect information is equal to the marginal social benefit. And this should solve the market failure with obviously increased consumption of the merit good. And obviously, again, just reiterating with the increase in quantity from Q to Q1. The welfare is maximised as there's no welfare loss. Originally, we did have a welfare loss of ABC, but by operating at the social optimum, that welfare should be maximised now. And we should achieve allocative efficiency.